Welcome, time for some art fun. Today, we're going to paint my Etchr cover. I'm scared, let's do it. In my last video, we did a tour of my 20-second filled sketchbook, and I asked you at the end to decide which sketchbook I should have as my next sketchbook to fill. And you, large majority, picked the Etchr Perfect Sketchbook in hot press, and this is the A4 size. Now I've already filled an A5 size, which is just your typical sketchbook that you would bring, in your purse or something. Very handy, very typical size. And I filled this a while ago. Let's see when. So this was number 17, and I filled it in July of this year. So I've already filled this one. The cover stayed pretty nice because I just kept it in the studio. The back cover got marked up. I don't know if you can see that, but there are some marks all over the back of this. And I'm going to paint this one just so that I can relax and not worry so much that it's going to get ruined. And also just because I've looked up a ton of videos on YouTube to try to see people painting their Etchr Labs sketchbooks. And I see people painting them, but I haven't had sort of my questions answered. That doesn't mean this video doesn't exist somewhere. I just wasn't able to find it. And so I wanted to make the kind of video that I was looking for so that if in future any of you were having the same questions that I had, maybe we could answer it. So this small A5 size was the cold pressed version, and it has that texture. And I used a lot of watercolor because it's really watercolor paper. It's 100% cotton paper. The cover is a really soft canvas, white canvas. They say that it's meant to be painted on. And what I'm going to actually do, I don't know if this will drive some of you crazy, but I'm going to use the little one that just lives in my cabinet right now with all of my other, like in my little drawer with all of my other filled sketchbooks. I'm losing the word cubby. It's a cubby, not a drawer. It just lives in there. So I figured, why don't I just paint some test things on this like I do in the first page of my sketchbook usually, and see how the cover takes different materials before I decide what I want to use. And frankly, so you can decide if you're not into ink. I'll do a little watercolor on this, some acrylic, some gesso, some Poscas, and we'll see what sticks and what works. And I can even do a follow-up tomorrow after overnight and see what maybe cracked overnight or what looks weird and what looks good. So we'll do that first. The one that I'm going to use now that's brand new is a hot press. So this ginormous A4, it doesn't even fit in frame when it's fully open, sketchbook. There's how big it is. And here's what this one looks like inside of it. This one is hot press, so it's smooth 100% cotton watercolor paper. And that'll be a different paper, it'll be interesting, and I'll be able to give you my thoughts, and I'll probably do a review on them once I fill this one up and see how we feel about it. So once I've done the tests on this and get comfortable with the different materials, then I'll put some paper behind this, so to protect the unused paper in there, and paint the cover. And I'll probably end up painting the back just with a dark color, like maybe all with blue ink or something, because you can see it's already getting it's accumulating hair. Ugh, it really gets gross and I don't like that. So maybe if I paint it, we can keep it a little nicer. Maybe things won't stick to it as much. We'll see. Good to know. All right, let's get down to it. Okay, I know you guys will probably freak out if I do this test stuff on the front, so I'm just going to do it on the back, which is already all crudded up. I want to test as much as I can because that's really what my question was when I was looking for videos on how to paint these. That's my dog snorting. He wants attention. I just wanted to see what do they mean, because on the website, Etchr Lab says that this is vegan. It has cotton fabric cover. It is very soft, which can be painted on. Doesn't say with what. It says the cold press, which is this one, has 230 gram cold press paper, and the hot press, which is the big boy, is the 220 gram hot press. Both are 100% cotton, acid-free, artist-grade paper, ideal for mixed media, and open flat. Is true. It does open flat. So now that we've got those claims out of the way, let's see what it can take. So I'm going to spray it with water. This is just a little water. Okay. I'm going to do some Tombow pens and a fake Tombow. Okay. We're going to test it all, folks. We're going to see. Ooh. All right. Okay, interesting. Interesting so far. and then it looks darker. I'll tell you in person, all three of those colors look darker on here than they do on paper. And then let's add some, ooh, that is, oh my gosh, this, I didn't clean that brush. Hold on, that was a not clean brush. Studio reality, folks. Okay, here's a clean brush. And it had a little more time to dry. So it is spreading around. Okay, and then let's see if I just dab a ton of water. Wow, that really lightened it. Look at that. Okay, and then let's do a little more into the wet parts. Okay, so that's the Tombows. Interesting. Kind of works. Doesn't look beautiful, but Tombows will go on there. Next, let's do watercolor. Guys, we're going to go to town. This is going to be so much fun. Okay. All right. Got a Pyrrole Scarlet type color. Okay, that is true to color. So far, I already can see the watercolor is better. Get that super wet because it is absorbing. Ooh, look at that watercolor effect. Dudes, you can watercolor on this. My dudes. So cool. All right, well, let's see. What if we try to mix? Yeah, ooh, that is super pretty. Okay, so watercolor I'm already feeling on this paper. That is already super pretty. Oh my gosh. I'm already like, okay, very excited about the watercolor. These are Regina's watercolors, if you're wondering. This is a glass mixing area. It's so nice. So that is a winner between the two. Let's do some acrylic paint markers. These are my grabbies. I'm loving these. Shake, shake, shake. By the way, I forgot to show you, these do unscrew. So they're just acrylic paint in here. You can fill, these are going to be refillable with your own paint. They don't sell new paint that I could see. Oh my gosh, okay, that totally works beautifully. That coverage is way better than the Tombow coverage was because you could see the little white bits in between the Tombow. Like, I'll just show you again. That's the difference between the acrylic paint pen and a Tombow. Whoa, okay, super pretty. Loving those. Maybe I'll use those. So far, ooh. I know I told you guys how wet these are in the Grabby pen review. I was not kidding. So that's the Grabby acrylic paint pens. Holy shnikes, this is all from that pink one. So I just wasn't as careful as I usually am because those are so wet, the paint just like falls out. That was my one negative besides no paint names on those. So that's that. I want to save the black gesso for last because it's going to really crud up my water. Let's do some gouache. Here's my Stay Wet adorable little palette with mostly Winsor & Newton. I hope you guys are appreciating this giant rundown of like literally every type of material. I'm loving these two right now. Those are in the front run. Those are my front running boys. Ooh, let's do this olive. Hello. Hello, olive. Okay, ooh. And because this is wet, because I sprayed it, it's spreading like watercolor would on a wet page. And then let's do some dry brush over where it was dry. Okay. Just so you can see up close how that looked. You can see the sort of spread around the edge there. And then let's get some of this, like, look how creamy that is. I haven't used these in a long time. Let's get some of that. This is on the dry part that I just put the other brush on. So it's blending. Yes, it's blending. Ooh, that's pretty. You can definitely see the texture like a canvas underneath. I hope you can see that. Very cool. So gouache is a go. I'm just testing the materials, guys. I'm obviously not trying to create a color palette or remotely anything. All I want to do is see what's going to absorb, how it's going to absorb, what's going to work, what might not work. So let's do some Turner Acryl Gouache. Yep, I went right on there into a dry part. Oh my gosh, okay, cool, love it. That one works really well too. Where it's super concentrated, it's almost exactly like the Grabbies, except a little bit less, well, that was wet, I guess. I was gonna say a little bit less bleeding. Ooh, that was fun. Okay, love that. Okay, So the Turner Acrylic Gouache works on this. Really good coverage on watercolor, regular traditional gouache, acrylic gouache, and the grabby paint pens. Tombow's not my favorite. All right, let's do ink. This is what I was assuming I would want to do. Dude, really? Are you not done licking? Can you hear my dog just licking himself like totally inappropriate? Okay, here is the ink. Tuffy. And here's it. Ooh, okay. This is what I thought I would want, and I want it. Look how it waters out. Oh my gosh. Guys, this is gorgeous. Okay. Oh, I love it. I love it, I love it, I love it, I love it, I love it. Okay. Ink is a go. And here's black gesso from Golden. I love this gesso. Yeah, that works pretty much like it would work on a canvas. Is it hurting your eyes that this is now the back of my super fancy, expensive, this is the back of it now? That I didn't even try to do a color scheme or make it pretty? I don't know why. Because I really could have done something with pinks, purples, and blues and it would have been pretty. I'm sorry, artist friends. I'm sorry for hurting your eyes. But here's the information we have gleaned. Black gesso leaves a lot of crud on your desk. Grabby pens will bleed on you. And all of these materials will work on an Etchr sketchbook. Which one is your favorite? Before I dive in and pick, try to guess. Which one will I use? Ink, black gesso, Turner Acrylic Gouache, traditional gouache from Winsor & Newton, grabby paint pens, watercolor, or Tombow pens. I think you're all going to guess I'm not going to go for the Tombow pens, but which of the other ones? They all worked really well. So this is now my 17th sketchbook. I have to tell you, I don't mind. This looks like how your apron will look if you wear an apron in your studio. We're back the next day, and I left it in the sun. So you can see there's a little bit of fading on the ink from the vibrancy when it was wet. And as well as with the watercolor, just a little bit, it just soaked in, I think, even more once it wasn't wet anymore. The grabby pens stayed exactly the same. And actually, I have Posca 2s. More of you probably have Poscas. Let me just try one for you so you can see if that works the same. Yeah, not as wet. Ooh, they blend. These are fun to blend, the paint pens. So yeah, it works pretty much the same. These are just wetter as usual. These look the same. Ooh, the gouache is like sticky. Okay, interesting. The Turner Acrylic Gouache is totally dry and feels good. The gesso feels a little rough. Turner feels good. I don't know why this is even a thing, but I think I would care because the canvas feels so good. The ink feels just like the acrylic gouache. The paint pens are like a little rough like the gesso is. Ooh, the watercolor feels no different than this as on its own. Yeah, the watercolor feels the best. Tombows feel good too. So I think I would do watercolor. Tombows, I mean, they're okay. I shouldn't be so rough on the Tombows. They look pretty good. They just, I don't like that, like, I can see through to the white thing that's going on. See? So I like the watercolor the best because it soaked all the way in. It feels the same. I mean, it's barely decipherable. What am I talking about? It's just because this is so soft. This is barely distinguishable from the canvas itself. So yeah, I'll probably use a mix of inks and watercolor. Wait, sorry, before I do that, I wanted to drip some water on the next day to see if it lifts and moves around again. Yeah, the watercolor moves around again. Okay. The ink moves around again. Ooh, the gouache really moves around, but I laid a heavy, heavy layer down. So the gouache moves around again. This is the next day. This is acrylic gouache, so it shouldn't move. Doesn't move, okay? That's permanent. These are Tombows. They're water-based too, so they might move. I'm trying to do the dried part, not the from today part. They really only move a little once they dry. So that's more of a permanent. If you want something a little bit more permanent when it dries, even though it's a water-soluble, that's one. These don't move, and they're not supposed to. That's acrylic. Acrylic paint pens. And the gesso moves. Oh my gosh, the gesso moves. Look at that. The black gesso totally is supposed to be permanent. but it's kind of moving around the way that black ink would. Okay. Okay, wow, super interesting. That's a question I had was, what is gonna last? What if I want it to move or if I don't want it to move later, because this is gonna be on this is gonna be on my desk, you know? And what water's gonna splash on it. So the Tombows are a good option for that. The acrylic is a good option for that. The ink actually isn't as permanent as I thought it would be, wow. And the watercolor is better than it would be on a piece of paper, but moves a little bit. So let's actually just do a drop. Like what would happen if the kind of thing that would happen if I, dropped something on my desk. And we'll put this aside again while we paint this and see what happens, just for you all, so you can decide what you want to do with your sketchbook. So now we're going to paint. I'm super nervous, but I'm also starting to get excited because of these two. These two are making me so excited to paint. But now for the pièce de résistance, the big boy. We're going to paint this sucker. For some reason, I felt a lot of stress painting this in the beginning when I was doing this first layer. And I think it's just because I was so scared I would ruin this, and then it's the first thing I'm going to look at every single time I turn to the sketchbook. And this is a pretty big sketchbook, and it's an extremely expensive sketchbook. And so I was just so scared. So I was just working as fast as I could because I didn't know how this watercolor and ink mixed media piece would go. I really had no idea, even with practicing. So what I did was I sprayed the whole fabric cover with a little spray bottle of water to prep it to sort of have a wet in wet effect. And that is what happened. As you can see, as I'm laying down watercolor or ink, it will spread. And so I did a first layer generally where I wanted these structures to be, but I knew they would be bleeding into each other. And this was truly like a first layer wet and wet effect. I made a cloudy sunset sky and a sunset sort of desert scape. And I laid down a dry on dry effect, or I guess wet on dry because the brush is wet, but just sort of a dry-ish brush, not too wet of a brush on top of this once it fully dried. It took forever to dry until finally I just took my heat tool, that's the wire you see off in the distance there, and just dried the whole thing because it was taking forever. This thing just stayed wet. So that's super helpful. Had I known it was going to just stay wet, unlike a paper that will dry if you don't move quickly with your first wet and wet layer, this just stayed wet. So I could have just kept working and working in the first layer longer, and I didn't really need to feel all that stress. It was right around putting down the pink layer of dry that I realized this was going to come out well, and I was going to be happy looking at it. And I really am. I loved doing this once I got the hang of it. Again, high stress in the beginning, but then I got the hang of it. And I love it. I love how it came out. I love that you can see the little llama on the right, their logo, Etchr Labs logo. I loved how the sky came out. I loved the depth with the purple mountain at the bottom. I did paint the sides. I painted around the edges, and it didn't get into the book, as you can see, because I did put a big piece of paper in between. I loved this project. I hope I answered all of your questions. I certainly would have appreciated a video like this before endeavoring into this project, so hopefully it helps you. Please check if you're subscribed. If you're not subscribed, I would so appreciate it if you would subscribe. Remember to like the video and leave a comment with what you thought. Until next time, remember, create something cute.